Hi, it's Bruce. Good morning. Today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the lessons learned from my recent honey harvest. Stick around, I think you'll like this. Okay, a lot of you who know me know that in the past, when I've done the honey harvests, I have pulled out each frame, brushed the bees off, put it in a separate box, taken them in and extracted the honey. That works pretty well. It takes a lot more time, right? So I've never really cared about that. And a lot of times I'd extract from a couple of hives today and a couple more tomorrow like that. But to me, I decided to try and go a little bit more efficiently this year. And so I did it the way a lot of you all have been doing. Now, queen excluders, right? I typically was not using queen excluders for honey work, for honey extraction. I used my queen excluders mostly for making new bees, making new queens. If I'm isolating a queen to one box while I'm doing stuff in other boxes, that's what I was using the excluders for. But this last honey harvest, I used my queen excluders. So I had excluders. Before I harvested honey, I went through and I got the nicest looking honeycombs and I put them up in the top boxes, made sure the queen was down below, and then I put in my queen excluder. All right, I used Fume Boards this time. Now, Fume Board, if you don't know, it's a little black board and it's like a lid for your beehive, but the bottom of it is felt. And so you spray a chemical on that felt that the bees don't like the smell of. In my case, I used Honey Bee Gone. It was fine, that worked well. You throw that fume board on the top. Bees hate the smell of it, so they'd run down. They go downstairs. And then you can just pull that super off that you prepared earlier. Okay? Now that was a good way to go. But lessons learned. We had a little bit of a setback from Hurricane Ian a few weeks ago, and that was during the Brazilian pepper flow. That's our biggest flow of nectar for the year in this area. And what had happened with that was that that hurricane just trashed a lot of the plants. It washed the nectar right out of the flowers, you know, and so we would have had a lot more nectar had Hurricane Ian not come through when it did. But when I harvested just before Hurricane Nicole, I had 2 supers on 2 of the hives that I was harvesting, and 1 super on, on 4 others. So I ended up with a total of 8 supers that I was harvesting. They were all pretty full. There might have been 1 or 2 frames that I didn't pull from, but pretty full. Okay. What I did was I put that fume board, the first time I used it, and I put it on the top box, waited a few minutes, opened it up, bees were gone, so then I threw the super over on my cart. The problem that I had was that even though the bees ran down, when I pulled that top box off, a lot of the bees didn't go all the way down below the queen excluder, so there was still quite a lot of bees, especially in that second box. And then, of course I had to pull that first box off and put it on the cart. A lot of bees ran back up. So I had way too many bees when I pulled my supers off, right? Next time, I'm going to put the fume board on the top box, run the bees out of there. When I pull off that top box, I'm going to throw the fume board on the next box. And while I'm putting that super on my cart, then I'll go back and pull that second box off. I should have a lot fewer bees that way. Okay, that's one. Second thing is the cart. Okay, I have that thing. It's like a garden wagon. Gardeners use it to pull around, and it worked all right. It was too small for a super. So what I did was I put a piece of plywood on top, and with the plywood on top, yeah, that worked. I used a couple of ratchet straps to hold the plywood down on the cart, and that worked. Fortunately, I had my daughter helping me, but it would have been a lot easier had I only had one of these. Yeah, after the honey harvest, we had Hurricane Nicole come through right after I harvested honey. And I had a lot of cleanup in the yard to do. I was fortunate that I didn't have any real damage, but I had like 3 trees come down. And so there was a little bit of chainsaw work, and my son-in-law came out and helped me. It was very good. But this garden cart made my life so much easier because if I'd had that for the honey harvest, it would have been a lot nicer. So word of the wise, automate where you can. Second lesson learned is the cart I use to haul the supers away from the bee yard. Next time, they'll be in the back of the cart that gets pulled by my lawnmower. Okay, so that's the second lesson. The first lesson was more efficient use of the fume boards. The second lesson is using more automation, using the tractor, my garden tractor, to pull the cart. Okay. The third lesson I should talk about: bee escapes. Bee escapes. Now, there's a lot of bee escapes out there. There's the cheap little ones you can buy from the big companies, Man Lake and Dedant, or you can even buy real cheap Chinese copies of them on eBay. But you can have these little cheap bee escapes. They're like $5, and they fit in the slot on the top of your inner cover, if you use inner cover and telescoping outer covers. The bees go through, they can't figure out their way to get back up. A lot of people have said that those cheap ones are very slow to work, and a lot of times the bees can figure out how to come back in. The ones that work better, there's several styles. My friend DC made up some triangular shaped ones, and these are known as Canadian bee escapes, or some people call them Quebec bee escapes. Anyway, real simple to build. If you are interested, I'll build some in a future video for you. My friend DC put those on, and he gave them 2 days. The bees all came out. They couldn't figure out the way to get back in, and there you go. It was very easy. I was there when he harvested honey. He just grabbed supers off with no bees in them and took them and put them on his cart. That worked pretty well too. There are some caveats down here in Florida. Now, so much of the YouTube beekeeping content has to do with beekeeping up north in the country where it's cold and there's snow. Here in Florida, we have some unique challenges and stuff. One of the big problems we have down here is the small hive beetles. I've recently done some videos on small hive beetles. Take a look if you want to see what that is, and you should. But the small hive beetles, they have them up north, but they're not near the problem that we have down here. If you were to put a bee escape underneath your super, so the bees go out and that box is empty, that box is also undefended. You could get away with a day, maybe 2 days, and maybe all the bees wouldn't come out of there. Maybe some would figure it out and come back in. But if you were to leave it there for, say, 3 days, I could imagine that box is unguarded, undefended, and the small hive beetles are there, and they're going to be wreaking destruction in that unguarded top super, right? I don't know how many eggs a small hive beetle lays, but you think about our bee queens. A healthy bee queen, when everything's right, she can lay up to 2,000 eggs in a day. So how many eggs can that small hive beetle lay and hatch if they're in an unguarded area like that? So I'll use I'll use the bee escapes next time. I'll build some and I'll use them next to honey harvest. But I think if I use the bee escape in conjunction with the fume board, maybe I'll put the bee escape on a day before, but by doing it that way, I think that I'll protect that honeycomb from the small hive beetles that are going to be inside there. So you run the bees out, you pull the supers off, throw them in your garden cart. So the third lesson learned is going to be the use of bee escapes next time. Okay, that was good. Now, if you watched my video on harvesting all that honey, you know that before I actually started really spinning out, all the honey. Well, I spun out all the honey, and then I added the supers back on, the wet supers back onto the hives, so that the bees could clean out the wet supers. Okay. Unfortunately, then the next day, Hurricane Nicole hit, so I only gave them a day with the wet supers, and then I had to pull them back off when I was getting ready for the hurricane. So I pulled off the extra supers and I strapped all the hives down so I could survive Hurricane Nicole, and thank God that Hurricane Nicole passed us by and everything was fine. However, what you didn't see in that video, you saw a clip of me putting wet supers back on the hives after I spun out the honey. But I was just wearing my little lightweight hunter's bee hat net thing. I was just wearing that because that's what I was using in the garage when I was spinning out the honey. When I was putting the boxes back on some of the hives, especially over on that side of the bee yard, I was in a hurry. I was tired. I wanted to get this part done, right? I didn't light a smoker. I just went over there, pulled the tops off the beehives, threw the wet supers on, threw the inner cover, then the top cover on, and moved on. I caught the bees kind of by surprise on this side, and I knocked it out pretty quick and got it done. But when I got over on this side of the yard, they were ready for me. They were waiting. And I had a whole bunch of bees go up my veil, and I took like 3-4 stings right in the face, and you've seen from my videos, I take a lot of bee stings and I don't really mind them, especially in the hands. I've got arthritis in my hands. Some days my hands are real sore. I completely believe in my heart that the bee stings, the venom in the bee stings helps my arthritis. The melatonin in the bee venom actually is an anti-inflammatory, and arthritis is an inflammation of the joints, and I think it helps me. Maybe it's not good for everybody. Your mileage may vary, but a big old bumblebee flying around me here. But what I should have done was respected my bees more. I should have grabbed some smoke, blown a little smoke around like you always do, reduce that attack pheromone. I should have had the proper bee hat on, and I would not have taken all those stings, So that was a lesson learned. Respect your bees and use your smoker. And then the final lesson, my daughter is a trooper. She really helps me out a lot. I'm so lucky. I've got 2 daughters and a son. The youngest one lives closest to me, and she's my partner in crime on a lot of beekeeping stuff. But she had a great observation to make. She said, "Dad, this is a lot of work." I said, "Yes, ma'am, you're right. It certainly is." She said, "Why don't you contact your bee club and reach out to some people, get a bunch of people over here, buy them a pizza lunch or something, give them a jar of honey at the end, and get like 5 or 6 people to come out and help us harvest this honey next time." I said, "Wow, you're absolutely right. What a good idea." So my last lesson learned is get help, especially when you're an old fart like me. I'm not 20 anymore. It's not as easy as it once was. So anyway, that's my lessons learned. Now, my next video, I'm going to talk about rendering and cleaning up some wax and stuff. I'll show you some of the chores you got to do after you harvest your honey. But this is Bruce. I hope you've enjoyed this, and y'all have a great day.